Yo, 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 yo. What's up, everyone? I hope
What up?
everybody's doing great because right now we're at episode number 6 for our podcast, Libérer la parole. This is our first podcast in English, and we're super excited for tonight's guest, a person that I've known for a couple of years now. I
More than
think
one
it's
in a couple, bro. More than a
Yeah,
couple.
yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
we've been knowing each other for a while, but
Yeah.
I'm really happy that we get to have this conversation tonight on a different topic because obviously you're very involved in the arts world, whether
Mhm.
it's for filming, dancing, and all of that. So right now we're gonna get a chance to chop it up in a different manner. So, Stefan, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing very well. Very well. Thank you so much for having me, for creating this space, for some discussions that hopefully will give people an insight on just what it's like to be black in Montreal and just kind of my perspective on what we're experiencing right now.
All right. So I just want to start by asking you, obviously, to tell us a little bit more about you. I really love your craft, everything that you're involved in. So I want you to share with the people like what you're about and some of the stuff that you want to share with us.
Cool, cool. Well, I mean, I'll just start. I was My parents are Haitian, but I was actually born in Kinshasa in Congo, DRC. I lived there when I was till I was 2, and then I came here, uh, and I lived in Montreal pretty much most of my life. Lived a bit in the Maritimes and in New York City. Uh, I I started. I was not somebody who was really into the arts very young. I was really into sports. and science. And so it's really my early 20s that I really discovered my passion for cinema. And so I became a journalist for independent media, CKUT, the Mirror, the Hour. Did some stuff on CBC also. And then later on, I started, and around that time, I also started dancing, did a bit of theater, and eventually, like, cinema became my main passion. And then I went from being a critic, a journalist, to actually being a creator. That was my big shift, my mid 20s. And but throughout all this, like, dance has always been something that's always been a big part of me. Like, I went back to school and did a major in cinema, but I did a minor in dance. So that's where I met a lot of the B girls that, Solid State, like, all the ladies from that crew. I started learning how to break with them because they would organize classes and stuff like that. So dance has always been, I feel like I'm married to cinema, but dance is my mistress. You know what I mean? It's like, it's
I
just,
like that. I like that.
like, cinema is such a long process. Like, you have to write grants, you have to sell your, you have to hustle. There's so many. It's such a resource based art form, as opposed to dance is something you could do. You can actually have the complete artistic experience
Mhm,
in an instant. You
mhm,
create a cipher, you have a space. And so for me, it's always been like this space where I felt I could really be free and not be dealing with institutions, which, as a filmmaker, you're constantly dealing with institutions, whether it's to get money or to actually have the access to filming. Like, it's a whole game. And so dancing for me is such an outlet to really get back to the purity of creation. Um, and also, way to the purity of blackness.
mhm,
I feel like it's dance is a language that, as black people, it hasn't been lost in the Middle Passage. We were able to obviously transform, but keep a lot of our rhythms and dances. And for me, like, in 2011, I had a chance to go to Mali for about
mm.
3 weeks. And I was able to really travel in pretty remote places. And I remember I saw a ritual dance on the peak of this mountain. And at that time, I was studying house house dance. A shout out to Dazzle, Mr.
Yep,
Foundation,
dazzle. Yep,
you
yep,
know,
yep.
and and I was blown away to see them doing steps that were like exactly house steps. Like, it's not even like you had to look for them; they were like bang on. And I kept seeing that traveling to Mali, people dancing, elements of the jack. It was just like, it just blew me away. And it was like, for me, it was important to have that experience because it's just to realize that we come from somewhere as a people. And yes, we all got dispersed, but I think dance has always been a place that, or a music also, of like instant connection to our roots. Um, those are all, it's already spaces that blackness is very celebrated, as opposed to cinema, which is not really that. I mean, it's starting to happen now, but I would say it's in the last years that this has happened. But it's always been, yeah. It's like, as a filmmaker, that's why I had so much affinity for PK Subban, because I felt like, as a filmmaker, I was experiencing what he was experiencing.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Being like a fly boy in the buttermilk. Um, if I can use that expression, by Greg Tate, rest in peace. Yeah, so it's always been like this sort of dichotomy for me, but now it's becoming more. Now that I'm doing music videos and dance films, it's, I understand the connection with the two. And because of the fact that I'm still dancing, dance is still a big part of my life. Um, I'm starting to understand how it's something that I never want to let go. As long as my body can do it, I'm gonna want to dance.
That's dope. I'm happy to hear all this. There's already a lot of things that you mentioned in that little small introduction that I want to refer to.
Yeah.
You talked about how dance is this the reason why you love dancing so much is because of the freedom that
Mm,
it allows you to experience and everything. However, you made the comparison with the film industry where you feel like it's very limited, and because of the, the granting that you need to, like, all
Yeah.
of the logistics of grants and
Yeah.
stuff like that. I think we're experiencing that a little bit in the dance world for those who are making a living off of it here in
Hmm.
Montreal
Hmm.
or even in Quebec,
Hmm.
because a lot of, most artists have to depend on that type of system also.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
that this is one of the reasons why it is so everything that's going on right now is affecting us to a certain extent, especially for those who are dependent on that system. I mean, it doesn't keep us um, from using dance in the way that it was originally meant to be used. You get what I'm
Yeah.
saying? However, that's probably one of the positive parts about this whole pandemic and the stuff that we've been going through. It forces us to really go back to the roots of our practices and what we're doing.
Hmm.
However,
Hmm.
it's been definitely affecting us in terms of seeing how the system that we're depending on is kind of like not necessarily on the same side as the actual artists. I don't know if you see where I'm trying to get with this. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Like, we're
Hmm.
very
Hmm.
dependent on the system that uses artists to make um the whole machine work. However, when things fall apart, then we're in a different position. What is your take on that, and how do you feel it affects, artists, and especially people from marginalized communities? Everything that we've been experiencing for the past 2 years.
Yeah. Boy, it's a very I'm in a strange position to answer that question because I remember there's a dancer called Rodney, which her name, her last name is escaping me. Is it Desir, her last name? Rodney? Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Um,
Rodney, right?
c'est ça. That's it.
Mhm.
So she's like a very prominent dancer, choreographer, Asian, from Asian origin. And so basically, when the pandemic started and all those shows were being canceled and everything, she started doing a survey of black artists because she was advocating that there should be there was all this aid packages being sent left and right to different industries, including the arts, and she felt that because already we were in a precarious position as black artists, as black performers, that uh, the Quebec institution should do like a special package for black artists because she felt like we were starting to have our space in the dance world, and then because of the pandemic that once shows were going to start rolling up, we would sort of be 5 years behind again, like we're starting to go up the hill, now we're going to and then so she did a survey of black artists to see like, okay, what's your situation and whatever. But what happened with me personally is that just because of timing, I had filmed a lot of stuff right before the pandemic, right? And um, so when the pandemic started, like we were in a lockdown, but I had all this editing to do. So I kept actually I was busy, like I was busy, 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 and I was trying to keep up with what was going on to understand the science of what was going on. But at the same time, it was like this weird dichotomy because I was like I had deadlines and I had shit to do. So and also because after that, a few months later, the George Floyd situation happened, right? And one of the things that uh, I had co-founded in 2016 is a collective, a black film collective called Black and Black Films. So I started that a few years ago, and suddenly, and because between 2016 and 2020, we had made noise in the industry. We had been invited to speak on panels. We had created like um, film screenings to promote Black cinema. Our name was starting to circulate in the industry, and then so suddenly when George Floyd happened, and suddenly Canadian and Quebec institution woke up to the fact that there was systemic racism. Suddenly we were inundated with requests to talk, to be on panels. It was just like it was crazy, right? And luckily we're a solid group, and so we were able to dispatch people to different venues and media platforms. But suddenly everybody was like, "Oh, how can we help your film collective?" Because suddenly there was like this big guilt about like, "Oh, we didn't know there was racism until we saw George Floyd, and now we gotta do stuff." So it was just kind of weird because at the same time, like our, my career, well, especially Black on Black Film as a collective, we got a lot of funding suddenly to do what we do. I mean, what we're doing is to promote Black cinema, to train young Black filmmakers and everything. It's all positive stuff, but it's like, so obviously, we're not going to shit on funding, but it was just funny how it all came in at once, and we're not naive. We're old enough to and wise enough to understand that yes, there is goodwill behind it, but it's also because a lot of institutions know that they need to suddenly now fulfill certain diversity criteria.
Do you feel like there's a danger in that? Because this is
Yeah,
what I feel
there
like
is one.
there is
Yeah.
a huge danger in that. And this is why I think one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to you is because of that. um there's a difference between let us, give an equal opportunity to everybody because we feel like this is what our country represents and this is what
Hmm.
we're supposed to be doing anyway.
Right.
And oh, let us give money to those people so we could have them on our side and then weaponize that whenever we need to justify some of our actions. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah,
And
that's
this
for
is
sure.
this is this is something that I've noticed in the arts world, in society in general, but
Hmm.
obviously
Hmm. Hmm.
talking about the arts world because it's something I'm even at a political level, which we're going to get to a little later. But
Yeah.
I just wanted to know if this is something you've experienced, what's your take on it, and just elaborate on that a bit.
Well, it's a tricky thing because I think a lot of it's like the whole idea of like don't bite the hand that feeds you, right? Um, it doesn't need to be, this is not like communist Russia where you're funded with a series of guidelines of okay, you can't talk against the system. So we have a lot of freedom, but it's clear that we have to, even myself, like I realized that once we started to get funding and I would go to film events, right? And people started to recognize who I was in terms of like, oh yeah, well he's part of Black and Black film, but it didn't happen to only me. It happened to Henri Pardo, Will Prosper, Eric Hanago, Milan Augustin, all of us that are like really sort of the spokesperson of the group. It's like now when we walk into these events, like all eyes are on us, right? So we just need to. And I've noticed that, like I'm like, oh, I gotta behave a bit differently, and it's not because it means that I can't say what I need to say, but you just realize that now you're representing a mini institution that you created, right? And that there is this feeling of like, oh, y a du beau paraître, and I'm somebody just because of my political nature, because of my dad was an activist in Haiti who 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 almost died in the hands of Duvalier. Like I come from that sort of rebel Haitian revolution thing, Toussaint Louverture, what's up, like um, Jean-Jacques Dessalines and all that. So in a way, like I'm personally more of a I don't give a fuck attitude, if all these institutions stopped funding Black and Black film, it would still exist, and we would still do the work, right? Because we were able to do the work for about 3 years with zero funding. It was just us volunteering and stuff like that. So we're lucky that we are able to become something without institutions, and we will continue whether But I'm not. I don't know if everybody else in the group feels that way. Like that's just me.
Yeah,
You know what I
you
mean? Like
speaking for your
I speak
perspective
for
right now.
myself. Like it's like
Yeah.
I'm not saying that everybody in the group, but it does come with a certain level of pressure. And I do see that as people, not in our collective, but people, Black folks that are appointed in bigger position, whether it's in the arts world or in political world, and those are people that I grew up with, and I see them, right? Like it's our generation now that's starting to be leaders of this machine. I see people saying stuff that I'm just like, what? Like it's just and again, you wonder how much people are being told what to do, or it's like self-censorship, or it's like self-preservation. Like, oh, I'm gonna toe the line, I'm gonna toe the company line because I know that if I do that, like you're, if you're not, comme on dit en français, si t'es pas chialeux about stuff, you're gonna move up quicker because they're like, oh, that person's not a threat. Like that person is just like locked in step with the system, right? You know what I mean? So I think one of the things that I was able to make a living as a filmmaker without government help, with clients, with doing music videos, with all that kind of stuff. And if at the end of the day, for some reason, institution don't want to fund me, I'm going to still be a filmmaker.
And
I
that's a great message. I
Yeah,
think it's
like I
important to
built,
hear
I
that.
built, I built. My passion for making film didn't come from me getting a grant. My passion
Exactly.
for making film is like what I had to express and the actual practice of making film. Like that's my high. My
Hmm.
high is to practice to make film. It's not just to be like, oh, I'm going to a festival and I'm getting this grant.
I think it's important that we remind that ourselves that the power that we have without, and then again, like you said, let's be grateful and thankful when we do get the
Hmm.
support. But
Hmm.
as your nature as an artist is to be able to operate regardless because this is what you love to do, right?
That's right.
And we should not, because I've seen how this has affected a lot of artists because they've seen whatever puts food on their table, just
No,
get
no,
in.
no.
I totally understand how crazy that
Yeah,
could be, but um this also shows how that dependency is dangerous, and I'm bringing that term dangerous now again because this is what led us to bringing this podcast together again, where you get to a point where the people control not only your art but also whatever you could say outside
yeah,
of your practice, and that
yeah.
does not create a healthy environment at all.
Mm-hmm.
That does not
Mm-mm.
create a healthy environment, and then I think that we need to reestablish some sort of balance. But when you give the power back to the artists and make them understand their real worth outside of the system, outside of the machine, this is where you could create build more courage, build more people that are willing to speak up and to say what they have to say if they want to say, and keep stay in a democratic society, if I could say. But yeah.
For sure, for sure, for sure. And I would say that another thing that is I find has been really difficult to navigate, in the last 2 3 years is really the woke culture. And for me, initially, woke culture for me was like a very positive thing. Like I thought like being woke was like, okay, you're aware of the different oppressive system that happened that affect different people, whether you're black, indigenous, uh, racialized, transgender, gay, lesbian, all, every realm of marginalized people. Um, and I felt that finally it was a way of, okay, understanding how everything was connected, and it was like the same system of oppression that was bringing, oppressing a lot of marginalized people.
Mhm.
But I think along the way, wokeness became weaponized and politicized, and
Mhm.
also, I hate to say it, it got really commercialized,
Mhm.
and institutionalized, and suddenly it really became a way of canceling people that weren't exactly aligned with the agenda,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? And I am somebody who, I've basically, when I started to see, when I would question certain premise of wokeness, and I would start seeing people blasting me without knowing who I was, without really like quoting me, but insinuating stuff about me when I was like, wow, I never said that. And I was constantly having to say, well, where in my conversation did I say this? Like you're making a lot of assumption. And then I realized it was like it was hard to sustain those kind of dialogue because again, it's not based on what you say, is what you represent, right? So, for example, the fact that my dad was a doctor, right? Yes,
Yeah.
I grew up, in a privileged economic space. Like I
Yeah.
never had to worry about putting food on my table growing up. My mom was a teacher and everything. But that doesn't mean that you can use that to say, yeah, obviously, because of that, I don't have the same perspective as a Haitian who grew up in Rosemont or Saint
Mhm.
Michel or Montreal Nord, obviously. But I think because of my work, because I've taught, video and cinema in those communities for many, many years, And I think my connection to hip hop culture is part of that kind of
Hmm.
like leaving that world. And most people that I teach, when I tell them I grew up in Westmount, they're like, "What?" Because it's not like I don't carry that. I don't carry that. But once people find that out, then they use that as like, "Oh, okay, you don't understand what it's like to struggle." I was like, "Yeah, from the time I was like in my 20s, like my parents didn't help me. I went to school on my own. I only paid my student debts recently. Like I lived in places with I lived poor for. It's only now that my career is doing better that I have a bit of like a cushion, but it's like I know what it's like to not have money, you know? And so I just feel like it becomes hard to have deep conversation where who you are and where you're from, uh, the fact that I'm a cisgender black male, it's like that becomes they use that to weaponize the discussion. And it's like, well, yeah, I can see that obviously I'm not gay or transgender, so I don't have, but it doesn't, what I say still has validity because I'm a human being expressing a thought. So can we talk about my thought,
Yeah,
you know?
but isn't that but if the basic premise of woke culture is mainly intersectionality and stuff like that, isn't like
Right.
ultimately gonna lead to that type of thinking where we put all of
Hmm.
the emphasis on what people well, like where they're from, color of their
Yeah, the
skin,
identity, identity, yeah,
identity, right?
yeah,
So
yeah, yeah.
so obviously if we cultivate this type of thinking, then ultimately this is what it's gonna lead to. Like, you know what I'm saying? Where you're only gonna judge people or validate whatever opinion they have based on their identity because this is what we're cultivating and this is what we're putting on the forefront. You know what I'm
Mhm,
saying?
mhm,
And then I
mhm,
think
mhm.
again, I'm gonna use the same term again, dangerous. I felt like when I saw that those types of discussions and politics being put on the forefront, I automatically saw the danger in it. So whenever I saw that in my environment, when people, would talk to me, assuming that my political stance was this or that because of the fact that I'm a black person, for example,
Mhm,
and I was
mhm.
not surprised, and I wasn't even shocked because this is the type of society that we're cultivating right now. You know,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
it,
Yeah, I
yeah.
mean, I guess, it's a tricky thing what you're saying because I do think that any kind of political belief system needs to have checks and balances, right? So, for example, I grew up in a fairly, like, I would say, Marxist environment, uh, but at the same time, like, one of the things that my dad taught me is that he said like the fight for black liberation is a human rights issue, right? It's not that being black is some special thing. It's like you're black, but your right to freedom and especially it's just because you're human. That's the basic thing. It's not this thing of like, oh, like there's a privileged status to being black. I mean, some black nationalists have this whole melanin. I haven't seen evidence that because you have melanin, you have special powers. Like, black people lost wars and won wars. I mean, it's like they believed, they hurt
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah,
other
for sure,
black
for sure,
people,
for
like we're
sure.
not Superman and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, but and so in a way, like whenever I feel that those political movements, like in the case of world culture, forget about that, forget about the basic human rights issue. Um, then I feel it falls into this sort of hyper identity
Mhm.
politics, right?
Yeah.
Where you can't you can't question certain things, certain premises,
Mhm.
if you're not like if I'm not if I, the fact that I'm not transgender, right? I can't have opinion about uh, biologically male athletes
Mhm.
performing, who become women. I
Yeah,
can't have that opinion,
yeah.
right? Whether my opinion is right or wrong, I'm just saying like I don't, I'm. It's like even the fact that I'm mentioning here, like, you know what I mean? So there's certain things that you feel like, okay, well, I'm a human being, I have eyes. I mean, yeah, I have biases, obviously. We can recognize
Mhm.
our biases, but at the same time, if I think it'd be nice if my perspective as a non-transgender person would actually could help in the discussion. I'm not saying it should be the dominant because I'm not it. Um, but that's how societies evolve. It's really people from different perspectives that come
Yeah,
in. And I
definitely.
understand the reflex because marginalized people have been silenced so much. And so now there's this idea of like, well, if you're not the exact thing, then you shouldn't talk about it, right? So, and I know where that comes from. I just think that there needs to be a check and balance of how we're able to deal with very complex questions, and that at the end of the day, we still should be welcoming intellectual thought and
Yeah.
debates.
Do you feel like that type of reasoning has infected other spheres of society, which led to, us being put in certain
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
categories?
yeah,
When
yeah,
you
for
talk
sure.
about, like, for example, we talk about the jab, right? you know, it's almost like there's no possibility of a lot of people to have a certain kind of opinion about things, and with valid reasons, for
Hmm.
valid reasons. We are very polarized when it comes to the jab, but um I feel like this is also this type of mechanism of discussion that pretty much doesn't exist, is a direct is directly a result of how we're treating other issues in our society.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like, I feel like I'd rather talk about the mandates themselves than the actual jab because the jab is such a complex issue.
Yes, yes.
And I think it's a very, I think people get very, very emotional about it. Um, I don't understand why, to be honest. Like I've been vaccinated for all kinds of things in my life. Uh, uh, but as soon as I started discussing the present, like just discussing, not like not laying down uh, what I thought, but just kind of opening discussion about it, I just saw people really losing their mind over it, right? And really get into irrational territory when it comes to that. And so I think there is this type of tribalism that I feel is it's really, I mean, I'm blown away by what's happened in the last 2 years of like people have really picked silos, and I've decided that that was reality, even though the scientific data, obviously people can interpret scientific data in many ways, but there's certain things that are like it's reality, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and I feel like it has really shut down a lot of debates that I think could have really enriched the policies that our government took. And reading magazines and newspapers, I find is like there was a group think about all the policies that the federal and the provincial governments were pushing on us. Um, the fact that we never had a parliamentary debate
Yeah.
about the mandates. I mean, even in the U.S., they had, the U.S., which is like half the country doesn't believe in science. You know what I mean? Even
Yeah.
in the U.S., they had doctors from different sides coming in and discussing whether we should have mandates or not. Like that discussion is recorded, on C-SPAN. It's there forever. None of that happened in Canada, right? So when they would have these group of experts on TV, it was all people that believed the same thing. You never had somebody
Mhm.
who was like, "Oh, I don't," and those exist. Like I've heard podcasts of Canadian doctors who thought that what we were doing was total insanity, and those are practicing MD. They're not. This is not Dr. Fauci, who's never treated a patient in his life. It's like people that are like on the
Mhm.
ground treating patient and saying like, right. Um, so obviously this inevitably has to lead to Ottawa 2022 because
Oh my god.
yeah, we got to segue into that because I think for me that's where I really saw the brunt of the outrage, that I decided to go to Ottawa the first weekend to support the convoy, right? Um, I heard about it, on YouTube, on different platforms that I'm on. I heard about this convoy, and I did my research. quote unquote. I know people don't like that. Now, like doing your research now is like seen as a negative thing when you should
Yeah.
do your
I
research
mean,
about
we
everything.
have all this information floating around, but we
Yeah, yeah,
shouldn't look at it,
exactly.
like,
And we
yeah.
shouldn't look at it because the government says this. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm going to trust the Almighty God government um, and stuff. And they've been wrong on so many things in the past. So um, I feel like I'm somebody who's educated. I have good critical thinking. I mean, that's what I do for a living. Like making films, is especially documentaries. You're constantly having to deal with issues and see like what's your perspective as an artist expressing those issues. So anyway, so I did that, and I came to the conclusion that I needed to go. I needed to go because I felt that uh, yes, some of the people that were at the root of this convoy were not people that was fully politically aligned with, but the basic message about the vaccine mandate and the fact that in Canada you are not allowed to travel by air or by train. I don't know by bus, but I don't know if you're allowed to take Greyhound across country, but I know train um, was problematic on a number of level, on a human rights level, but also on a constitutional level. And I was very glad to hear that the ex premier of Newfoundland, Brian Peckford, who was actually part of, he was a premier when Canada reclaimed its constitution in 1982,
Mhm.
right?
Yep.
So with Trudeau Senior, so he was there when so he would know something about what this country is founded for, and he was outraged about that to the point where he's now suing the Canadian government for uh, the vaccine mandate because he says, and obviously there's so many, like I said, there's so many angles to question the mandate, but he says the right to travel, because we're like the second biggest country in the world, traveling in Canada is a human right. Like being able to work in different places, to go see
Yep.
family, to move around this
Mhm.
vast territory is like the internet, is like education, is like healthcare. It is part of being Canadian. We're not like France or places that are like where it's like small. It's a condensed. We're spread out, and so he's used that angle to sue the Canadian government. And so he's been doing that for the last months. And I think what happened in Ottawa, I think fueled his desire, and he's getting a lot of support from lawyers, judges, senators, who are realizing that what Canada was founded on, besides the genocidal aspect of Canada, but if you look at the legal aspect of Canada, the mandates totally go against that.
Yeah.
Um, and you cannot um, Trudeau and Legault have been um, ruling by decree. Now, what that means is that they're saying that we're in an emergency, which I think at some point we were, and that everything the government does can't be questioned because we're in a state of emergency, and therefore you can't have open debates about things that are really are at the foundation of our country, of the existential nature of being Canadian.
Mhm.
Everything has just got to be forced on us because there's panic in the air, and we've got to act, and the hospitals are going to overflow, and people are going to die, and it's just like it's going to be Armageddon if we don't act like this, and if we don't just like bow down to what the
Mhm.
government is saying.
So I know that we spoke about your experience after you came back from the convoy, and I think you posted maybe a few pictures of you being there.
Hmm. Yeah,
Um, so I just want you to share with me because you obviously you have your political views. There's probably, for me, if we talked for hours, there's probably a bunch of stuff that you and I disagree on or whatever.
yeah, yeah,
And I
for
would,
sure.
but I know that that probably brings you into a type of circle of people who are maybe like-minded, in terms of general worldview. But now they saw you, Stefan, black guy that I thought was my friend and
Yeah,
that
yeah,
I loved
exactly.
so much,
Yeah, yeah, for
betrayed
sure.
me, and he became a white supremacist all of a
Yeah,
sudden. He
yeah, yeah,
became
yeah.
a right wing uh white supremacist and then you have all the
Uncle
checklists and all that.
Tom, yeah, all that shit. Yeah,
Uncle
for sure.
Tom bootlicking, I don't know. I mean,
Josh,
Tell me
Josh
about the
Hudson, yeah, yeah.
hypocrisy. The hypocrisy. I've experienced it to a certain extent also. But my situation was with the BLM thing with
Right.
George Floyd. Because I was not posting, because I posted something that went against the general outrage.
Hmm.
Some people who are white and that I've never, spoken to in years were telling me how I was supposed to react and feel about this situation, considering my position in the dance world and all that. And I
Hmm.
just
Hmm.
thought it
Hmm.
was interesting because them confronting me in that way was going against their actual it was
Yeah,
a
yeah,
self-defeating attitude, so
yeah, yeah, absolutely.
how was that experience? I want you to share that because I know that a lot of people, not only in the dance world, just in society in general, are going through that type of backlash.
Uh, I think my experience of going to the convoy is actually I was very prepared because I think for the last 2 years I've been arguing with the left about the pandemic. So it's almost like my debating skills when it came to all the elements of the pandemic. So whether it's lockdown, curfews, vax mandate, vax rollout, like this whole ideology that has been put on us, I've been questioning a lot of the premise of that. And to my shock, a lot of people who are against the government, against corporation, against the matrix, against globalism, blah, 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 suddenly we're like, yes, we need to step up and be good soldiers and just walk in.
Yeah,
And I was just like, what? Like
yeah,
the same people that have like poisoned the waters, the air, and whatever, you're suddenly you think they're there to save your ass. Like I was just like, what the fuck is that? I'm not saying
uh,
that pharmaceutical companies are just there to kill people. I would never say that. But to have the premise that these people are there to help humanity is a total fucking joke. Yes, there are people, there's good people within those institutions that want to save people, but they're a profit driven machine.
mhm,
And because of that, I have more trust in what Cuba is doing in terms of the COVID vaccine because the COVID vaccine in Cuba is really, yeah, I'm sure they're going to sell it to other countries. So, yeah, they're going to do, but its number one premise is to really deal with the pandemic for its people. Like, Cuba doesn't want to have a bunch of sick people. So, it's going to do that. So, already you can question the Cuban regime and blah, blah, blah.
yeah,
But
for sure.
when looking at Pfizer and Moderna and all these companies that have been like criminally indicted in the past for lying about their data, for hiding deaths, like all that kind of stuff. And then suddenly people are just jumping in and just believing everything that's being said and not having a moment of like, oh, can we question certain things? Because you have a track record of lying and suddenly now, because we're in a crisis, I'm going to believe everything you say. And I'm not going to question that big pharma funds a lot of the commercial media that's
Hmm.
around,
Yeah.
funds a lot of the political parties that we vote for. And you don't think they have influence on the narrative. Like for me, that's all I was asking people. I was like, we can argue about the science, about the data, about the safety, about the efficacy of it. But for me, like people believing that lockdowns, curfews was really the only way, right? Because for me, it's like I think when you look at any crisis, whether it's war, whether it's disease, whether it's
Hmm.
sickness, if you come in with a monoculture attitude, you are like what's beautiful about our planet is diversity. Like
Hmm.
diversity is what like it's kind of like playing guitar. You
Hmm.
can do an F sharp in so many different ways. Well, that's nature.
Hmm.
Nature is not just there's not one note for like to get to equilibrium. It
Hmm.
comes from different points of view, and I
Yeah.
find that somehow we've gotten away from the way our own body, our own universe, our own work. We don't work with one track Like anybody who has a one-track mind, that usually person is going to hit a wall pretty soon because he's going against universal forces.
Yeah.
Universal forces is everything, and so suddenly people were thinking that there was only one way to deal with this pandemic on a societal, on a personal, and cultural level. And so there's a term that this journalist called Max Blumenthal just coined. I don't know if he coined it, but I heard it recently, and he calls the group the lockdown left.
Wow.
The lockdown left, and I I love it
LDL,
because
LDL.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
here
yeah, yeah.
goes the LDL.
It's just like it's like this belief that if we're just get stuck at home and don't see each other, that somehow it's gonna strengthen our immune system, it's gonna protect us, it's gonna like our our fear about the virus is gonna be like it's just like it went against everything about our bodies. Like our bodies need social action. Like our immune system is directly connected to our mental health. Like it's all interconnected. So if you're somebody who's isolated and not having human contact and is living in fear, your immune system is going to diminish, and therefore you're going to be much more prone to whatever is out there. So there's
Hmm.
so many things that for me we needed to be discussed uh, to really come to a much more holistic approach to this
Hmm.
whole pandemic. And whenever I would talk to people about that, I would just get shut down.
Yeah.
So to come back to the convoy, when I came back from Ottawa, I was, and I posted my thoughts about it. I was blown away where people were sending me videos from legacy media telling me that, I was blind, I didn't know what I was getting myself into. And then I would ask people, well, did you go to Ottawa? And they would say, no, but I have videos that I was like, okay, yeah, but videos, those are pick and choose and, a lot of stuff like, and for me, it was a great awakening that uh, I never had a situation like that where you're at an event yourself, you come home, and then you see how that event that you experienced
Hmm.
is portrayed in the media,
Yep.
and it's a totally different event. It's kind of like, oh, did I go to Ottawa, or did I like miss my stop and end it somewhere else? Because I feel like I missed some. Did I miss something? Did I miss the neo Nazis? Did I miss like all that? Did I miss all that vibe that supposedly is there? Because I was there, I talked to a lot of people, I didn't see any of that. I'm not saying that those things don't exist, but I was just blown away. So it became this constant debating about the premise of what this, and I was like, listen, the analogy that I brought to people is that Toussaint Louverture, to defeat the French army, allied himself with the Spanish army,
Mm.
right? Which was controlling the other part of the island.
Yeah.
And even though he was very aware that the Spaniards were as murderous, as racist as the French, he understood that that alliance could help his people gain independence,
Yeah.
right? And so, therefore, yes, there are people in the alt right. Yes, there are people who don't like me, don't like, the color of my skin in it. But the fact that they felt this um, fundamental breach of their humanity
Mm.
with the mandates, I felt it was very, very important to to be there and to support that. And um, I think as a society, I'm realizing more and more that social media profits. As I start to study social media and the algorithm and the
Hmm.
psychology behind them, it's really based to create more and more silos.
Yeah.
It's all like it's sort of confirmation bias, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and I see when I speak to people who have different opinions of me, I see more and more that it's that. For me to jinx that whole thing, I will actually listen to Fox News,
Hmm.
right? I will go on YouTube and listen to Fox News because I'm like, I want to, Fox News is problematic in some of its approach, but sometimes it has guests who do counter the
Hmm.
left wing narrative. And
Hmm.
those people I trust because they're not just pundits; they're actually experts, and
Hmm.
they can speak about the reality they see. And that feels that my feed on YouTube is much more diverse
Yeah.
because I'm not always listening to the same voice.
Yeah.
And but I find a lot of people aren't doing that, and therefore, when you challenge them, saying that I'm black, I align myself on the left, I went to Ottawa, I support this convoy, despite the people that are like Wexit or
Hmm.
pro big oil or black Trumpers or whatever. Despite that, I can still see when I look at them and I'm like, yeah, these mandates don't make sense or unconstitutional, go against our basic human rights. I'm like, yeah, if you're going to be a soldier in that fight, let's join forces. After
Yeah.
that, we can deal with the other issues. But
Exactly.
right
Exactly.
now, right now, we're being treated as cattle, and we're being as guinea pig on this vast social and medical experiment. Can we talk about that?
And I think it's the sad part is that you would think that events like this would actually bring people together, you know, um, because everybody is kind of getting the same treatment. Curfews were not for only a specific group of people, whatever. It was for everybody. Everybody was getting it. So I just thought it was a great opportunity to kind of build some sort of solidarity and build a certain connection amongst citizens. But it did the total opposite. And that's, mainly because of social media. But I was very excited to have you on because I know that you're somebody who traveled a lot. And when I say travel, I'm not only talking about going to visit places and all that. Like
Hmm.
you said, you do film, journalism, and all of that. So you really immerse yourself to whatever place that you go to, which I
Hmm.
think
Hmm.
helps a lot when it comes to building your critical thinking, understanding more
Yeah.
about like history. Um, and like I was telling you right before we got on air, is that uh, I feel like a lot of people around me are feeling like they're being activists and that they're being pro-black and all of that, but they never really immerse themselves into black culture other than black American culture, and they're not really paying attention to what's going on in Africa, what's going on in other
Yeah.
countries. So it's like
Yeah.
for me, it feels like their view on blackness has very little substance,
True.
and the only time that I see them react to certain things is when there's like media outrage on whatever's happening with, you know, black people, And I see that a
Yeah.
lot also not only with black people, because like I said, as a person who's involved in the dance world here in Quebec, I'm seeing that a lot, people that jump on the opportunity, and it's almost like they're using black suffering as a way to push their own personal agenda. And we could definitely get into like this conversation, but I don't want to get that. I
Yeah.
rather, and we could, we could go back like on another day and have this conversation. But what I would love to do is kind of talk about your future projects, because I know you have some great things coming up, and I just want you to kind of share your upcoming experience that you have going on that you shared with me a little earlier.
Yeah. So I'm very fortunate to be invited to teach at a film festival in Wada in Benin, and I'll be spending 3 weeks and a bit more in Benin to teach film directing to young West African students. I'm also going to be on the jury for the festival for feature films and stuff. So so yeah, and it turns out that my contract ends the day before my birthday. So my birthday is April 23rd, and so for me, it's like I think as you grow older, you realize that there's less and less coincidences. Like things just there's a universal. I mean, they are. I mean, yeah, there's a beauty in coincidence, but I think like you start to see like, wow, I'm not somebody who's like into determinism, but I'm blown away by how life creates itself in front of us, and for me, like going to Benin, understanding what Benin represents for Haitian people. So for those who don't know, the place that is now called Benin. was part of the a great empire called l'Empire de Dahomey, and that region of West Africa is where I would say, I don't have the exact numbers, but I would say like 80 to 85% of Haitians come from there. So for anybody out there who's Haitian, your roots are pretty much in Benin, right? That's where most slaves were brought in. And uh, another proof of that is that the voodoo, the version of voodoo that is practiced in Haiti is pretty much exactly the same that's to this day uh, practiced in Benin. Uh, Last night I was talking to a sister, Stella, who's a great singer, and she had been to Benin, and she told me that she had, it's funny because she went to Haiti, and then 6 months later she was in Benin, and she was just like, she kept blinking. She was like, "Oh my God, I feel like I'm in Haiti." Like she just felt like the humor, the way people spoke, their tone, just the body language was so familiar to her, and yet she had never been there. And she told me that when she came in, and she also was going there on an artistic project, the people from Benin were like, "You're home."
Hmm.
Like they are not blind to what I mentioned about that connection to Haiti,
Hmm.
and they when Haitians come into Benin, they're treated like family,
Hmm.
and so for me, like I've been to Haiti once, unfortunately, only once. I've been to Cuba
Hmm.
many times, and what you're saying uh, about blackness and how people have a very myopic view of blackness in North America is really important because people sometimes forget that being black in America is also being an American, and
Hmm.
that the same arrogance that you see displayed in the media and politics, when you see black people being locked in step with the system, for me it just blows me away because you know the mentality, the mentality, the sort of patriotic mentality of the US of like, we're the greatest country of the world, we're the land of the free, like all that stuff, that all that kind of mind fucking that they do to people. When you have black Americans having that same mentality and going to Africa and acting as if they're better than Africans because they have money, I'm just like, wow, okay, these people need to travel and really understand where they're from,
Hmm.
right? um, and I think being Black Canadian, you have a little distance from that. But also being a Black person that has been in other Black environments, like in Mali, like in Cuba, um, like in Haiti, you really it gives you a bit, and it's also like these experiences are outside of watching BET
Hmm.
or watching hip hop music videos and stuff like
Yeah.
that. Like as much as like hip hop culture is in my heart, I mean, it's
Yeah.
just me, but um, you start to have these human experiences with blackness, with black spirituality, with black uh, political, artistic, human expression, food, and all that kind of stuff, right? Nature, and then you come back and you're not gonna be sucked into to whatever BET is shouting out is shooting
Oh
at you,
yeah,
right?
and whatever box that people are trying to put you into, even on
Yeah,
a political on a political level,
yeah,
a lot of the time, like I said, there's a lot of assumptions when it comes
yeah,
to everything that we're going through, and of course, I'm bringing it back to our the
yeah,
modern crisis,
yeah,
but
yeah.
it's like I'm blown away on how, and I feel insulted, to be honest, also very
Mm,
insulted
mm,
by
mm.
some people in the community, some people in society that are putting you in that box, in terms of your way of thinking, in terms of your worldview and everything, for the
Yeah,
simple fact that of your skin color. But again,
yeah,
like I'm bringing it back to the again, it's a consequence of this intersectionality way of working, and I think that we need to bring balance. We need to bring that balance back, because there are realities that are connected to who we are as in terms of our identity. But if we
Hmm.
make that the only sole purpose of who we are, how we're supposed to think, how we're supposed to vote, how we're supposed to like act in the world, then it becomes a
Yeah.
huge problem. And I think that more black people need to step up and say that. But in order for you to have that type of posture, you need to go out there, and this is
Oh
why
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
really.
you need to, yeah, yeah, sorry.
No, go ahead.
You need to go out there. Yeah, no, and I think you're right. Like I was really one of the things that really supported me once I of the whole backlash of going to Ottawa is just when my dear friend and dance mentor Dazzle, he went to Ottawa and he posted, and he's somebody that I've known him for like 15 years, if not more, and he's somebody that I look up to. He's somebody that we talk eye to eye about stuff. And he's somebody who we're not perfectly aligned on a lot on stuff, but I mean we there's a common human understanding of what we have. We have a deep belief in creating diversity within blackness, right?
Mhm.
And when I saw that he had gone and he was talking about it openly and he was catching heat for it, I was like, okay, good, I'm not alone. And then the next thing you know, I'm starting to see that there's more and more racialized people, black, indigenous, sheik. The sheiks
Mhm.
had our own soup kitchen. And I
Mhm.
started to see that racialized people were like, yo, like, don't silence us. Like, it's not because we're racialized that suddenly we have to be lock in step with the Liberal Party and the
Yep.
NDP and all those people. And so I think there is that opening, and I think we need to expose yourself to
Mhm.
that. We need to become leaders. Like that's what I'm realizing is that we need to become leaders. If we strongly believe about something, we need to become leaders about it
Mhm.
in our own courtyard
Mhm.
because we need to become examples of what it is to be a free person,
Mhm.
right? It doesn't mean that everything I'm saying is right. Like even the stuff I spoke earlier, I'm not a virologist. I'm not an epidemiologist. Like
Mhm.
I'm not an immunologist, but I've listened to a lot of people from different points of view, and so I think as citizens we need to use our critical faculty to get different sources to stuff and to be able to say this is what I stand, and
Mhm.
I stand here now, subject to change,
Mhm.
but I can at some point we can't just be like, oh, I'm going to let the powers that be dictate who I am because I'm of the color of my skin, like you said.
Yes.
And I think, especially in Quebec, because that's kind of like the space that we are occupying as Black artists. It's important that, especially now, even regardless of the pandemic and the
Mhm.
convoy, because now as Black artists we are getting a bit more exposure, right? We're starting
Mhm.
to enter. Like I'm seeing, like some of my students are doing web series with Radio
Mhm.
Canada and stuff
Mhm.
like that.
Mhm.
I'm seeing this young generation of, in my case, filmmakers, but I'm sure it's happening also in dance,
Yep.
are getting exposure, right? What do we do with that? Like, are
Yes.
we going to become Gregory Charles?
Mhm.
Are we going to become Norman Brathwaite? Are we
Mhm.
going to become a lot of those Black Quebec celebrities who basically, once they get their paper, are just like, I don't want to touch politics.
Yeah.
Like I'm just a career climber. I just want to get the money, the recognition. I'm going to stay away from these things. And it's only when, like, it's funny how these people that I just mentioned, it's only when George Floyd happened, where even the white people from the South were saying, "Yo, this is murder," right?
Yeah.
You had like police chiefs from the South saying like, "This is cold." So only when that happened, suddenly these people were going on shows saying like, "Oh my God, it's really bad." Like, man, there's racism in Quebec, and I was
Yes.
like, "Well, it took
And
you that long. It
mhm.
took you that long to really say now that it's safe." Now that even right wing white people are saying, you're saying it's safe, and so I feel like there is a lot of uh, there's a lack of courage in Black leadership in Quebec to really take positions that are dangerous and
Mhm.
that are controversial because everybody is so afraid of losing funding, of losing this and that,
Yes.
and they're acting as employers. They're not
Mhm.
acting as free thinkers.
I think the most important thing to remember is that diversity, in my opinion, I'm definitely, interested. Well, it comes naturally to me because I grew up in such a multicultural environment. So I
Right.
automatically, when you come to my Crump events or whatever, you're gonna see everything. You know what I'm saying? So
That's
it's
right.
like something that comes natural. But what I realize is that when I focus on diversity of thought, it
Hmm.
automatically translates into diversity from an identical like perspective, from the identity standpoint. It
Yes.
automatically translates to that. So let's keep in mind that it is important to keep our identity, our diversity in thought, because even if we're black people, we
Hmm.
come from the same heritage. Our parents are from and we were talking about our parents. My father also had a rough path under Duvalier, and also we do have
Hmm.
like similarities, but at the
Yeah.
end of the day, we do have our own way of thinking, and I think
That's
diversity
right.
of thought is something we should need to put more on the forefront.
Yeah.
We're already past 5 minutes, but I
Wow.
mean, like I said,
Okay.
we could literally go for hours. But I
Yeah.
would
No doubt.
love
No
to
doubt.
finish, if you could, like under a minute, if you could just give us a sentence that would lead to a solution. When it comes to everything that we're experiencing, and I'm not talking in solution in terms of like a magical solution of how things could
Hmm.
get better and
Hmm.
everybody could be kumbaya after this, but it's just like, what do you think of is a step forward to like progress? And I mean progress, not like the left wing progressives that are saying progress. I'm talking about real progress. All right. Like, what do you
Right.
think
Right.
is would be in one short sentence the step forward towards progress?
Wow. I. It's so hard. I mean, to be honest, like I can only use myself as an experiment, right? And for me, knowing knowledge of self, it all starts there. You have to know who you are. You have, and I think being an artist, being a dancer, going into the cipher and dancing, putting yourself out there. I've learned so much about myself through dance. I've learned about my strengths and weaknesses, right? Putting yourself out there in society, you're gonna learn so much about this. Okay? So I want people to really have the courage and don't be like those social media activists, right? People that are just like but they actually don't do shit, or they don't actually put themselves, they don't put their bodies on the line for what they believe. I think that putting yourself out there, knowing you are, acting, then reflecting, always going back and forth. I went to Ottawa. I talked about it. I reflected on it. Whatever. It's after that, then there's all kinds of solutions. But I think it starts with the understanding who you are, what your collectivity is about. Like I think we are we are herd animals. Like that's our thing. We are tribal beings, um, and so we need to accept that, but also understand how within that, within the tribe that we're in, because that's how we are. We're not like egos that can live out on their own. We live in collectivity. What is the space that belongs to you as an individual, and what is the space that belongs to society, right? And that
Hmm.
comes back to when we're talking about the body sovereignty, right? There's got to be a dialogue between that. I'm not saying that, oh, freedom at all costs, that you can do whatever you want, and
Yeah,
no,
yeah, yeah.
because your actions do affect other people. But we need to really start to have a bigger discussion about what belongs to us, what belongs to collectivity, and have a healthy relationship with that, so that when we act in society, you act in that with that balance in mind at all time. What you say, how it's going to affect people, and stuff like that. But again, I think putting yourself out there, um, seeking different points of views about your belief, allowing yourself to be challenged in your point of views. I think for me, I've seen the biggest, like, honestly, I found that my mind in the last 2 years, because I've been researching, debating, I feel like my mind took a leap away from that groupthink of the left,
Hmm.
because I started challenging the premises of the left, because I started to see the hypocrisies of the left. And it's only because I challenged some of the dogma of it. And I was like, whoa, okay. So my tribe is actually can be very dogmatic about its belief. It can
Yep.
be like very self-righteous. Oh, we're the left. we believe in human rights, we believe in the environment, we believe in blah 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 blah. And yet when you challenge it with facts and science and arguments, they're like, no, 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 you can't. And so again, it's that have for me has been such an amazing, as difficult as the last 2 years has been for all of us. I find it on a mental, on a pure cognitive level, it's been like I feel like liberated now because now I feel like okay, now like okay, I belong to that tribe, but I now I have a much more adult relationship with that tribe because I can really start challenging its
Exactly.
premise. Yeah.
That's dope. That's fun to hear, man. Um, so Stefan, thanks again, and everybody who's tuning in, who watched the episode live. Thank you for tuning in. I know we talked about so many things, and again, like I
Mhm.
said, like I feel like we could have went for another hour.
Yeah, for sure.
I love
Yeah,
talking to you, and hopefully we could do
for
this
real.
again.
Absolutely.
This is the goal. This podcast is just like to break the silence, to let people talk, and to give people more courage when they hear other people from different walks of life uh, express themselves without having to hold back. This gives a lot of courage to people, and this is our goal. You can
Hmm.
also peep Stefan's work on Vimeo. So if you go to Vimeo and you write his name, it's right there on the screen. If you
Yeah.
write that, you'll have access to his work. He's doing great work, and man, I want to thank everybody for tuning in. And I know we went over, but that's all good. I think it's worth it. So, my
Yeah.
brother,
Yeah.
thank you so much, and I'm looking forward to more conversations. I think that we have a
Absolutely.
there's so much to learn from you, and yeah, we're gonna do that pretty soon.
For sure, and yeah, Seven Star. Thank you for your work, also as a dancer of bringing Crump to Montreal, being a representative, and also put yourself like everything that I was talking about. You've been doing it. That's why we're having this conversation because you put yourself out there. You've taken a lot of risk as somebody who's very prominent in the dancing. You've taken a lot of risk about your views, and you're taking the heat for it. And I like I said, I respect the fact that you're a free person like
Yes,
you are not somebody who's just going to follow an ideology just because you're being told to. And I think you're totally an example for the younger generation to be like, okay, I don't have to believe everything he believes, but at least I can respect the fact that you're not bought and sold by anybody.
exactly, and this is true freedom, in my opinion.
Right on.
So yeah, I'm gonna keep it that way because that's the only way it's got to be, man. So thank you,
Right on.
everybody, and I hope y'all had fun. And we're gonna see you next week. Peace.
Oof.